Welcome back. Thank you very much for watching for Sense and Sensibilities with Rod and Tim as we continue talking about the topics that you may have considered, maybe even heard about, or more importantly, maybe haven't heard about and perhaps need to be thinking about. And the one that strikes me today, Tim, is this whole idea of wills and trusts and a couple of words that people may not know: intestate and then holographic wills. And we look at the reason this all came up is because Jane Buffett is suing Richard Monzenter, who was Jimmy Buffett's financial manager and business manager, because he had set up a trust. Jane was going to have some access to it. They were trustees, I believe.
Trustees, correct.
And yet they're in court now fighting over $275 million because Jane isn't exactly happy with Richard now that Jimmy's gone. And so there are so many examples of what's gone on in this arena that we should probably talk to your clients about the fact that even though they may have done some good planning, there are still some things that they need to be watching out for.
Yeah. And how exciting is it to be talking about Jimmy Buffett in July, 4th of July in Michigan? I mean, Margaritaville. And it's interesting that, people, I think a lot of people view Jimmy Buffett as pretty laid back, but he is a pretty shrewd business person. And as you mentioned, amassed, almost $300 million of wealth. And it wasn't just his singing, it was restaurants, casinos, beer brands. I mean, this was a guy who was multifaceted. So I'm excited to talk about it. Whether it's 275 million, maybe not all of us can relate to that, but no matter the dollar amount, I think there's a lot to be learned from these high profile cases. And you reported for decades, and I'm sure you had some experience with some similar examples.
Oh, definitely. And in fact, right after Prince passed, I did a piece on dying intestate, because he did. Intestate is the legal term for dying without a will. It took him 6 years to solve that case. It was an $80 million fortune that ended up getting split to the family, and a judge had to make that decision. And usually probate takes 25% off the top. So all of a sudden, the family lost out on $25 million or more.
There might have been a few legal bills associated with that settlement, right?
Precisely. And then Aretha Franklin, I sat in on the probate hearings on that. And yes, she died technically intestate, but what she did was what was called a holographic will. That's when you write down your wishes on a piece of paper, have somebody go ahead and witness that, which is perfectly legal. But apparently, I don't know if she had it witnessed or not, but the bottom line is they couldn't figure out which of her holographic wills would work. And so it took 5 years and $80 million, later, it was a mess, and it took forever. And so we see these problems cropping up, and it's one of those things where even though you think you might be taken care of, you might want to go back and double check and triple check just to make sure that your wishes are going to be handled properly down the line.
Yeah. So, I think that's an easy first step for folks. Make sure you're dealing with an estate planning attorney that obviously is very competent in this area. Things are well documented. That's a must. Anytime you update documents, they should reference the past ones. So it's very clear to the family which are the current documents. Now, Jimmy Buffett's a little bit different in that, by all means, it sounds like he had his estate in order, right? There's reports that for 30 years he had trusts in place and continuously amended, which you can do with revocable living trust. And I would say he even did the right thing by having co-trustees, his wife and the business partner that you mentioned. And the reason that is important, and a lot of our clients, it's certainly germane as well. Jimmy left his assets in a marital trust, which basically means, hey, while my wife is living, I want her to benefit from this money. After she passes, I want to make sure it goes to my children and not someone else. For example, maybe a new spouse, right?
Exactly.
It's very good planning. And when you have that type of setup, you generally want a second person, right? You don't want the beneficiary being sole control, because bad things usually happen. So I think the structure was good. All right. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, but is it a situation where, the best I can tell, that Jane only was given access to about $1 or $2 million a year? In other words, it looks like Jimmy put her on kind of, put her on a salary, as it were,
Yeah,
and she's
I was
looking.
going to say kind of common, Rod, that you would have from the trust. Income would go to the spouse. There are principal distribution rights they usually call HEMS, health, education, maintenance, support. So the trustees could agree to give more money if she needed it for her, like a custom lifestyle.
Right.
Where I think maybe with this dollar amount, they could have improved. A lot of attorneys will use a third person, kind of a tiebreaker. So when there's fights between co-trustees, we have a third person, sometimes it's called a trust protector as an example, who is just there to split the tie, right? We have
Right.
two trustees that can't make a decision unanimously. Well, we go to this trust protector, this third party, and he or she can help make the decision. And it sounds like that wasn't in place. And again, with these dollars, that probably would have been a smart decision.
Well, and considering that Jimmy's catalog will be streaming cash into perpetuity, really, and so yeah, you're definitely going to want that. So instead of having the judge be the tiebreaker, you want to build that in so that you're
Yeah.
not spending enormous amounts of money in court, and depleting the inheritance that the kid, your wife, or the kids are going to get down the line.
I mean, it's a great point. That's why we put trust in place for, we have the rules in place already. Privacy, all of a sudden we ask a court to decide on something, and now we're opening up all of our affairs to public. That's not intended. So I just think there were a few things maybe that he could have done in his planning that would have potentially avoided this. But the reality is, this, I know this. When you put humans into the equation, right, things can go south, and hopefully they will be able to reconcile and make sure this money is used for her benefit and ultimately goes to Jimmy's kids.
Precisely. I think of south, sideways, haywire, anything else you can throw on the list there.
There's an old saying, you never know a person until you share an inheritance with them. I mean, people do irrational things around money, right? And I don't know who's right or wrong here. I do know that I really like the idea of co-trustees, but probably having a third person, not the court, in place would have helped in this situation.
Very good. And I've always understood it that the reason probate exists so that people don't kill each other over what is left in the inheritance. So yeah,
Yeah.
one of those things that, even though you think you got it right, it's probably a good idea to go back and review, and maybe that third party is exactly what you need. So Tim, as always, you give great insight, and we're grateful for that. And so enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching.